Sweat trickled down my neck as I hauled my beat-up suitcase up the steps of that gray stone house in suburban Baltimore. The July heat was no joke. Sticky, heavy, like it wanted to pin me down right there on the doorstep. I was 29, single, and a million miles from the dusty outskirts of Damascus, where I'd grown up wrangling a herd of younger siblings. This was my shot, my first gig in America, nannying for a family that looked straight out of a sitcom. The wife was all polished, her chestnut hair pulled tight, and the husband had this easy grin that put you at ease, even if his broad shoulders screamed ex-jock. Their kids, a 7-year-old girl and a 4-year-old boy, came at me like a whirlwind, all giggles and questions. I barely had time to catch my breath before the wife handed me a schedule thicker than a diner menu. Breakfast at 7, park by 10, no screens till noon. Those first weeks flew by in a blur of peanut butter toast, school drop-offs, and block towers that never stayed up. At night, I'd crash in my downstairs room, the AC humming me to sleep. I'd lie there, bone-tired but buzzing, thinking, I'm doing it. I'm making it work. The wife barely looked up from her phone, always rushing off to some meeting while the husband lingered, asking if I'd settled in. You good? He'd say, and I'd nod, ignoring the way my gut twisted. Back home, I'd been raised to keep my head down, to stick to the rules. But here? Here, I was starting to wonder what rules even mattered anymore. Some folks might say I was chasing freedom. Others might call it running from myself. Either way, I was in deep now. 2 months in, and I'd gotten the hang of the chaos. Peanut butter toast at dawn, school runs, and chasing the boy around the backyard till he'd collapse for a nap. The wife was a ghost, always jetting off to some corporate gig up the coast, leaving me and the husband to hold down the fort. He'd work from his office, the one with the big window facing the apple trees, and I'd catch him watching me sometimes. Like that day the boy spilled juice all over the rug. I was scrubbing away when he strolled over with a towel, his eyes lingering a beat too long. My stomach flipped, and not in a good way. After that, he started popping up more, grabbing groceries with me, asking if I'd eaten, brewing coffee while I diced veggies for dinner. I'd brush it off, keeping it cool, but my old school upbringing screamed watch out. One night, the wife was off in Philly, kids tucked in, and I was sipping tea at the kitchen counter trying to unwind. He walked in, water bottle in hand, and sat across from me. The silence was thick, like humidity before a storm. He didn't say much, just stared, and I felt the air shift. Long day, huh? He muttered, and I nodded, bolting to my room before it got weird. My heart was pounding, and I kept thinking, this ain't right, girl. You know better. Some might say it's just friendliness. Others'd call it a red flag. Either way, I was kidding myself if I thought I could ignore it. August rolled in with storms that rattled the house like a warning. That night, the kids were out cold after a day of tearing through the park. I could still feel the ache in my legs from keeping up. I was scrubbing pots in the kitchen, the sink water steaming, when thunder cracked so loud it made me jump. He showed up in the doorway, shirt sleeves rolled up, the lightning flashing across his face. He didn't say anything at first, just stepped closer, and I swear the room shrank. My hands froze mid-scrub as he reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from my face. Then it happened. He handed me the dish I'd been reaching for, quick and electric, like a fuse blowing. I pulled back, chest pounding, startled by how close we'd gotten. Later, under the drumming rain, we ended up in his room, fixing a flickering lamp, the air heavy with something unspoken. It wasn't loud or wild, just quiet, deliberate, like we both knew we'd crossed a line by staying up too late. Morning hit me hard. He was downstairs flipping pancakes, acting normal, while I stared at my reflection, wondering who I'd turned into. The wife came home the next day, all smiles, handing the kids candy from her trip. You're a lifesaver, she said, and I forced a grin, guilt clawing at me. I kept asking myself, how'd I let this happen? Some might call it a slip, others would say I'd been waiting for it. Either way, I couldn't unfeel it. Weeks after that stormy night, life split in two. By day, I was still the nanny, packing lunches, braiding the girls' hair, dodging the boys' endless energy. But when the wife hit the road for her next gig, me and him turned reckless. We'd wait till the kids crashed, then steal moments. In the living room with the TV muted, planning the next day's chores, or his office while papers piled up on his desk. I'd swear every time it'd be the last, but his pull was like quicksand. He started noticing stuff, like how I'd toss mint in my tea or stack the kids' socks just so, and it got under my skin. One night, with the wife off at some conference, he slid a cookbook across the counter, all Middle Eastern recipes he'd snagged from a used bookstore. "Thought you'd like it," he said, smirking. My hands shook taking it. Too much meaning in that gesture. But the guilt was a freight train. The wife'd come back, all chipper, leaving notes like, "You're the best," while I'd dodge her eyes, knowing what I'd done. I stopped praying, let my routine slip, barely recognized the woman in the mirror. I'd think, this ain't me, but I can't stop. Some might say it's just human nature, others to call it a betrayal of everything I stood for. Either way, I was sinking, and the shore was long gone. By September, I was drowning in my own mess. The sneaking around with him had become a rhythm. Stolen glances, late-night brushes in the hallway. But it was eating me alive. One night I sat on the back porch, the air crisp, stars punching through the dark. I could still hear my dad's voice from back home. "Stick to your path, no matter what." He came out, sat close, but I held up a hand before he could start. I told him I was done, my voice steady despite the ache. He just nodded, eyes heavy, and let me go. Next day, I started hunting for a new gig, quietly, through contacts, till I landed a spot with a family an hour away. The girl picked up on my mood one night, tugging my sleeve. "You okay?" she asked, and I lied, saying I was just beat. When I broke the news to the wife, she blinked, confused. "We'll miss you," she said, hugging me tight, and I swallowed the lump in my throat. He walked me to the taxi, fists clenched, silent as I drove off. I thought that was it. Clean break, fresh start. In my new place, I tried piecing myself back together, even knelt to pray one night, feeling the quiet settle in. But a month later, word trickled back. The wife filed for divorce. Some nosy neighbor had spotted us that rainy night, and it all unraveled. The kids were caught in the fallout, shuffled between homes, and I pictured their little faces, lost. Then came the twist. I got a package. No note, just that cookbook he'd given me, mailed from his address. Inside, a single line scrawled on the first page. "You were enough." My breath caught. Tears hit the paper, and I laughed through it. Bitter, free, alive. I'd wrecked everything, but somehow, I'd still been seen. This is an artistic and fictional creation intended for both entertainment and educational purposes. Any resemblance to actual people or events is purely coincidental. Some scenes and dialogues in the video are part of a dramatized performance and incorporate elements of grotesque, satire, and exaggeration. The creator stands against discrimination, violence, and hatred. This channel fully complies with YouTube's policies and does not infringe upon copyright laws.